All right, let's bring in Joe Terranova now of Virtus Investment Partners and Malcolm Ethridge of CIC Wealth. Both are CNBC contributors and both own the stock. Joe, are you as optimistic as Mr. Ives is?
I'm optimistic when you look at positioning, because positioning specifically in the options market is suggesting a very bearish sentiment towards Apple. The put to call skew right now is in the 80th percentile favoring puts. That's an extreme level that we have not witnessed. Let's also remember what Scott introduced earlier in the conversation. The technicals on this stock just 4 days ago looked awful. So you have very bearish sentiment. Let's remember this does matter to the market. The August earnings report, the stock was above 190. After that earnings report, it went below 190, never got back there again, and the market followed through with a pretty ugly quarter. So this is going to be critical. And if, in fact, you are correct and we see a better than expected earnings report from Apple, guess what? The chase for performance begins tomorrow morning.
Does it matter to you, though, that the chart over the last few days, I mean, look, it's up 6%, 6+% in a week. So the whole dynamic going into the number has completely changed. We said before, wow, this stock looks horrible. It's trading down into earnings, which rarely happens.
Yes.
The whole story always is, wow, Apple's running into the number. Is there going to be a sell on the news? Well, in the last 5 days, we've reversed the whole story. Now it's running into the print again. So how do you make do with that?
So the technicals are improving, and you asked me initially if I had the same optimism that Dan has. I didn't answer that, okay? I laid out the bullish scenario. Now I'm going to give you the bearish scenario because, quite candidly, I'm not sure what to expect here. Will the services business, will the cash flow be strong enough to maybe overcome the weakness in China, maybe the weakness surrounding the iPhone 15? But really, I believe what we're going to hear from Apple tonight is we're going to take the temperature, I believe, of the true economy. This is really going to tell you what the state of the economy is. And if, in fact, Apple misses tonight, well, then I think your expectation has to be that the stock itself, it will be on the retreat, and the bearish technicals since August will take over once again. And I think it's an indicator for you of where, in fact, the economy is going to go over the coming quarters.
All right. So Malcolm sold half of his position in the middle of May when it was at 174. So now we said we're at 177.5. What do we think?
Yep.
What do we think about the stock here? I asked at the very, very top of the program if we think the worst is now behind this stock, at least for the near-term period. How do you answer that question?
Yeah, so I told you I was going to sell half my Apple position and half my Microsoft position at that time because I thought the market had gotten a little overblown. And I know you thought I was crazy, but today, looking at it with Apple up something like 2% the last 6 months, I feel like, I didn't really miss out on anything. It's pretty much come full circle. So I'm not necessarily as bullish as Dan, and it sounds like Joe T is as well, near term on Apple, right? This is not a trade for me. This is one my kid will probably inherit, so I'm long-term bullish on Apple. But in the next 12 months, I think they have some work to do. I think they have not necessarily just a China problem, but I think they have an iPhone problem in the sense that they have to diversify away from 50+% of their product mix, of their revenue mix, being the iPhone. That, to me, is one of the biggest existential threats to Apple. And to Joe's point about this giving us an idea directly of where the consumer stands, I don't know that it necessarily tells us as much about the consumer as it used to, in the sense that the cycle for replacement on iPhones has just gotten more and more extended than it used to be. And so we can't necessarily just predict automatically that every person who owns an iPhone is going to be willing to upgrade every 2 years when they come out with the next new one. And I will say that with the perspective of a person who's still holding an iPhone 8. So do with that what you will.
Why did they have to diversify away from their bread and butter product any more than they already have? Between the other,
the biggest.
Hang on. Between the other hardware devices that they obviously have come out with, and then how big the services business has grown to. Why do they have to do that?
The biggest existential threat to me as it relates to Apple is not China. It's actually the day that a T-Mobile, Verizon, or AT&T decides that they're going to worry about their own business and they're no longer interested in subsidizing the cost of every person who wants to upgrade to that next new iPhone. To me, the moment one of those companies comes out and says we're making a change to that, it's over. That's 50% of their market share. So right now they enjoy being the largest company by market cap at something like $2.6 trillion. That gets whacked in half the moment one of those CEOs from one of those big three cell phone carriers says, you're on your own, Scott. We're not going to subsidize you going to the iPhone 17, 18, 19, 20.
You want to respond to that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, people have been saying that, and Malcolm raised great points, really for the last decade. And if you look at the carriers within the U.S., I mean, this is the golden goose in terms of Apple, for Verizon, in terms for AT&T.
So you don't see it happening?
So we don't see it happening. And I think the important thing is carrier discounts are actually increasing, because ultimately 250 million right now have not upgraded their phone in 4+ years. That is the opportunity, and that's why it's the best install base in the world from a consumer perspective.
How do you want to address that, Joe? I mean, it is, to Dan's point, you could easily make the argument it's the most powerful installed base for a consumer product company ever, arguably.
And the retention is insane, above 90%. So I do think, though, that it's critical in terms of understanding where the economy is. I disagree with what Malcolm's saying. One of the reasons why is if this is going to be a weak holiday season, if consumers are actually going to be affected with their buying intentions, I don't see how a Tesla can be so impacted by the increase in rates, by the increase in the economic environment. And then we could say, okay, well, you look at a consumer-facing company like Apple, and we're going to dismiss the economic impact of what might be unfolding. So I think this really is going to tell us something about the holiday season, about where we're going to be as we move forward into the coming quarters. And again, the way you overcome that is the services business and the usage of cash. I don't know what they're going to do with their cash, what they're going to do with their buyback, but that's the way you overcome it. And if you can overcome it, then I think Malcolm has done the right thing in selling half his position. I think the stock is in a place right now where it's sitting on the fence. It could go either direction, but it's got to be that services business and the cash to save it.
Honestly, I feel like that's a little over the top, suggesting that Apple is like this great read on where the overall economy is. Apple revenue, first of all, the economy's been really, really strong for the last year, right, at least. Apple revenues have declined every quarter over that period of time. The iPhone's been up and down. It's told us nothing about the broader strength of the U.S. economy whatsoever. It hasn't. So why is it going to now? Okay.
Well, you have new products that are being launched. You have a holiday season, which is typically the strongest quarter for Apple. And if Apple is telling you that they have muted expectations for that holiday season, isn't that a direct read-through for what the overall holiday season is going to look like?
I don't know that it's a one-to-one comparison between an upgrade cycle for a new phone when people already have phones versus if they're not upgrading, that's somehow a statement on the weak economy.
I think you have to look at it from the perspective, though, of this is the quarter. The holiday quarter is supposed to be the best quarter for Apple, and if they're telling you that quarter is not going to be a strong quarter, what's the signal? What's the message there? You just dismiss that? I don't think you can.
I'm not dismissing it, but not willing to make some broad brush comment about the overall economy based on what they say about demand for the new iPhone. I don't know. Okay. Malcolm, AI. It's the one thing we haven't talked about yet. What do you want to hear from Apple, if anything? It's the one company that really hasn't given you anything to this point, right? They're being deliberate. They're being patient. They're going to get it right. Most people think it's around Siri. Do you need more definitive information today or not?
Yeah, so leave it to Apple to provide us with a more elegant solution on their timeline, right? That's pretty much what the expectation is for them around AI. But I think to Joe T's point about, he was alluding to the amount of cash that Apple has on its balance sheet, right? Something like $166 billion in cash equivalents that, if they park it in treasuries, it's going to provide them with a really nice yield, and that's really all they have to do. But I want to hear about how the company is going to innovate itself out of this rut that it's been in, and whether they're going to work there. You've heard me make the case for them to push further into fintech, for example, right? Are we going to get a new partnership with somebody to replace Goldman Sachs? Separately from that, are we going to get something in the world of connected fitness maybe, right? There's companies like Peloton that were once COVID darlings that are now cast out that they could pick up for pennies on the dollar. And so I'd like to see Apple become really innovative with the dollars that they do have sitting on the sideline on their balance sheet, as well as finding ways to integrate AI into their product set and impress us with the ways that they can make Siri make us more efficient and tell us to do things we didn't even know we wanted to do.
What do you think about AI? What are we going to get? When are we going to get it, and what's it going to mean?
Well, I think in June is where you're going to get it. That's where they're going to start what I view as the AI App Store that they're going to lay out to the developers and to the consumer base. And I think that's really the opportunity for them in terms of monetizing.
What is that, WWDC? Is that what you said?
So, yeah, so I think that's where they ultimately lay it out in terms of the AI App Store for developers. When I look at Vision Pro, it's really just the start in terms of courting developers. And I believe a year from now, we have an AI App Store that's within the ecosystem.
So a year from now, Joe, are investors patient enough to wait a year from now to get more answers on AI?
I think so. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be. They've been rewarded in certain circumstances and in select stocks year to date. I think it's one of the stronger theses as why you could be bullish equities in 2024.
And there's no surprise up Tim Cook's sleeve at all about an acquisition of any kind related to AI or something else, is there?
I don't believe, but we've talked about it. I think even for a company that's never really done M&A outside Beats $3 billion, we believe for the first time, I think ESPN, I continue to view that as sort of, that would really be the trophy case for them to look at ESPN asset, because that's something from a live sports perspective. It's a unique, and we think 30, 40 billion, they could easily do that.
What probability would you put on that?
I think 30 to 40% probability that they're seriously looking at it in terms of the opportunity, and if anything, at a minimum, a strong partnership. But I believe for the first time, maybe ever, they're going to significantly look at a larger deal here.
Wow, okay. We'll make that the last word then. Dan Ives, thank you. Joey, thank you. Malcolm Ethridge, to you as well. Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.